I just wanted to ask you, Michael, because you have written a book called Dragon Mother, and you do a lot of focus on female psychology, and I find it interesting. And I just kind of wanted to ask you, I know what the typical idea is of feminism, at least what, people would call third wave feminism, or like the kind of stuff that we're faced with today. But overall, what would you say originally what it was and what it is now? Or what's the difference between what it started out as and what it is now? And why is that even relevant to this topic from your point of view?
It's huge, but I would say that if it's manifested by Mary Shelley, because again, there's positives and negatives, right? If you go back to Anne Radcliffe, some of the great writers and all, they were working with their shadow. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein at 18, and she was having having experiences even before that. Anne Radcliffe is a Gothic novelist, and there's others out there. They were working with their shadow. On the psychological level, there was mega transformation happening in the female psyche. But we know that Pluto always is a very similar archetype than Uranus, which rules freedom and emancipation, right, and progressiveness, and Neptune, which is about that would have manifested in the plethora of spiritualistic groups, love them or like them, right, that were proliferate all over the 19th century. And these Emily Dickinsons, everybody, dabbled in this, right? In England, you had it, and that's where the anti-Bassants come from. That's the spiritualistic movement is a whole entity unto itself, and it's the Neptunian version that women, by being prohibited, or let's say in their own minds, they were unintegrated into the male society of the time, found an outlet. So through poetry, through spiritualism, right, table tapping, Ouija boards, and all the rest of it. And psychic societies, like we have Nicholas Roerich and his wife and all of that. So what's happening is the movement within the female. You talk about the lunar level, right? So somewhere these plutonic lunar aspects were manifesting. On a psychological Jungian level, he would just say that the animus in various guises was working with women to get them to want to be leaders, to say, hey, you guys are doing it wrong, let us take the ropes, right? Now, of course, the whole thing went fucking histrionic, and we know why, right? We're not going to get into all of that. That's the conspiratorial aspect that sensed what was going on the occult level and co-opted it. Women, if you look at my female Illuminati work, women have been in charge of a lot of stuff for a long, long, long time. So it's not that it began in the 20th century or 19th century with the suffragettes. That's just one manifestation of it. But the positive roots of it is in we want women to be we want aspects of femininity to be seen aright, right? You've seen certain aspects of womankind up to now, and we're going to show you some other ones. There's nothing wrong with that. How could you deny that to women if then you'd have to deny it to men? They also said to themselves, we have creative, urges that haven't been, explored before or whatever, or we see injustices in the world that desperately need to be fixed. And a lot of it was probably just actually quite recreational. We just want to play more. We want to have more play, less work. All of this. There's many factors involved. So these are the great archetypal title things that happen underneath. I think that a lot of things start positively and then get, if they become negative, it's with time and it's with wrong people co-opting a particular thing. I'm an optimist in the sense that I think that a lot of things start off as a positive way. And it's just like any individual's birth. Nobody's born evil, right? I mean, it's just not possible. Something goes wrong after that period of time, and all that I would say is I shifted back to the fetal experience rather than the Oedipal, and our society still has to kind of download that fact, but it's still it's still post conception. It's early enough to say, they might have brought it in from another world or they were born evil. No, the fetus it has just as much ability to be in tune, with the deepest reality as it does to have that reality cut off, and that's what Dragon Mother's about. So then, if you pull back from the canvas, say we had to do this just as an experiment, and you pulled back as far as you could get, some more speculative aspect will say, well, in the greater journey of the female on the planet, like in a Yuga way, you would say, all right, they'd say this is all of this evolution. So the woman has to go through her own Persephone experience, and we're going to be doing this next week. The woman has to it's like the walker and the road, right? The walker can blame the road, but he's the one who would fall over it on a straight path. When you deal with an archetype, it's your intention. All right, let's look at it this way. Every archetype, if there's 6 of them, there's 9 of them, there's 100 of them, it wouldn't matter what. They're bearing gifts. And you know them because they've arrived with a gift. You don't know them in themselves. You know them because they're bearing gifts. And they'll stick around until you take that gift from their hands. They never leave until you take the gift. Right? That's the thing. And if you don't take the gift, it's a snub, not only of the gift that they've borne, but the archetype itself. And usually it'll fuck with you now. It will return in a demonic form. But we can't go into that right now. All I'll say in very brief to answer your question is that the messenger has arrived with a certain gift, and therefore they have their comportment, they have their presence, and they have their influence. But how you receive the gift, right? Whether it's with a smirk, whether it's with curiosity, whether it's with, oh, what is this? I don't even need this. Why did you bring this? Or haughty contempt or whatever, is all important in the dynamic, right? So what women have brought in, or we're going to be talking about this next week, right, is in the relationship they have with their own archetypes. And these are aspects of the self. These are beings that you are, right? You're relating with aspects of yourself. They're not foreign. They're just, the ego likes to see them as being foreign messengers. These aren't foreign messengers. These are the soul coming in front of you because of that Hegelian synthesis. They want to move you as a being, your ego, up to a level, which is expansive and real and total equilibrium. Basically what we would know as enlightenment. But how you relate to those archetypes, and some of them are what we would call masculine, not male, there's a difference, masculine. So what you saw there in history with the suffragettes and the original feminist movement is the collapse of woman's own relationship with their animus. They failed. And so it came back in demonic form, and it's still going on. Nothing has changed. All these boogaloo fruitcake movements that are out there right now, and all these flunkies that are, vote for me, right? Crap all over the world. They are just the external manifestation of the return of the animus in demonic form. So I hope you tune in next week, because we're going to try to unpack that more and show what that means, But it's that contrarium again. You get a choice. That's what determinism is in it. You choose how to relate with that archetype, just like, a guest coming into our house. We've chosen to put them in the maid's room or the best suite. And do you think their behavior at the breakfast that the next day is going to, don't you think they're going to, their attitude towards you is going to be totally different based on if they had the beautiful, suite, or they had the maid's room with the spiders and the cobwebs? Of course, at breakfast over the freaking cornflakes, they're going to have a sour puss on them, based on that. So again, it's a highly specular relationship, and that has to be borne in mind with astrology, with psychology, with even sociology. But I'm personally will say it out loud. I think the thing started well enough, but it got banjaxed, by these monstrously evil people who work for the UN and these other orgs. They knew what was happening. They always do, because they're looking at the freaking astrology. When you said earlier on that these billionaires use it, these controllers in the EU and the UN and these other shady orgs, these Nicholas Roerish types and all the types, the semi-mystics that they've hired, right? These Barbara Marx Hubbards and all, they actually know the astrology and they know what's coming. They're very high spiritualists and they know these social movements, and then they say, we got to co-opt that. We got to get our people in there. And we'll be talking about them as well as we go down through the weeks about who they freaking are. I think people know their names already. And they banjax and sabotage a legitimate movement of the people towards spiritual development.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would have to say that I agree with what you said. Now, I have some thoughts on that if I may comment. There's the question I had. Now, I don't necessarily consider myself a feminist, but I definitely feel like I am, as a woman, I understand female psychology pretty well because I've been studying human psychology for a long time. And I do think it's important to explore the shadow dimensions of both genders. And I think the biggest conflict, I don't know, Michael, if you consider me to be some kind of feminist or not, because I've done talks in the past about misogyny and things I've noticed in the media, not from what I would consider a feminist point of view, but the idea that with all of these MGTOW guys coming out complaining about women in a way that it's like now they're going to shirk their own responsibility and it's all a woman's fault all the time. I mean, you're talking about, in those instances, very specific types of women, that's not all women don't think like that. So to me, it's important to make that distinction in order that people understand that there's a lot of ignorance around psychology of both genders. And, you know, it's like, what do you call it? Dr. John Gray wrote this book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. That whole thing is really important to understand. I think just knowing that without denigrating the other, but definitely not being afraid to explore the shadows.
He's a good guy. Yeah, he's a good guy. You know, I met him, and we had a good talk and everything. And you're quite right. I like some things about MGTOW, but that's provisional. And I certainly see the negative, which is that these people are psychologically absolutely ignorant. And all that they are reacting to is some stereotypical image of woman, which was false from the start. So their image of female, you know, these are chivalric men whose image of women was banjacks from the start. Go into this in Dragon Mother. And so I understand the reaction, but that's the best you can do? What you want is psychology, psychological insight. That will be good for women and it'll be good for you. Same thing I would give the advice to women. You need psychological insight into the male. That'll be good for the male and it'll be good for you. Once you leave consciousness at the door, well, right, you know, okay, carry on, but I don't invest too much in it. You know, and some things you find might be semi-interesting and relevant, you know, but it's fool's gold. It's a fool's errand. Because man needs woman and woman needs man. And you can't do shadow work. Shadow work, as David said, is in the relationship. I pointed this out. The relationship is one of the greatest instances of shadow work, or the shadow, what we call the shadow, the plutonic aspect, starts appearing more in your relationships, more than it does even inside yourself. It does, you know, it does manifest in other ways. But it seems that in what we call the phenomena, right, the real essence of the phenomena of what we call relationship, in every form and in all forms, the essence of why we're on this planet to have a thing called relationship. That's because the shadow elements can manifest there, right? So the one who cuts off, I understand why they're doing it, so they get a breather, right? It's like saying, you know, we don't want this influence anymore. You know, there's a Luke Kelly song about that, Peggy Gordon, right, where he dreams of an island in which there's no women around. Just get a breather from them, you know, all that, the rabbit. So there's that aspect of the male mind who wants to separate and just go, enough already. And in many ways, that's healthy because all of us need to reset. I think somebody mentioned it earlier. There's a reset point where you have to come back to who you are, right? The introspection is all about, what do I feel about it? I've had all these influences. I've had all these other people's influences and says and commitments. Introspection is nothing more, right, than the returning to the setting of what you are, what your innermost heartfelt, you know, comportment is, and then moving back out into the realm of influences. Now we're living in an anti-introspective world, so everybody's permanently caught up in other people. And so what MGTOW is a pathetic attempt to try and separate from what their image of woman is. It's mostly inauthentic, yet it's understandable, right? And there's been other precedents for this as well, you know, both on the domestic level and on the political level. So I'm a person who loves destruction and deconstruction. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with these plutonic forces. So when something stirs the pot, new stuff will come out. Like you saying that you like to do things on odd days, that maybe, you know, walk under the ladder just to see, you know, what falls in your head. There's a certain aspect that's very healthy that way, because, and I'm the same, that something happens. I don't necessarily buy into it and wear the t-shirt, but I like what it's doing because it's stirring the pot. And that's plutonic. Pluto and the archetypes are tricksters, and the shadow's a trickster, and you know, and the sort of there's a trickster element of Uranus, and I think there's a trickster element of Pluto very much, and it's just like looking under the paving stone to see what we can find. So MGTOW to me is nothing more than that.
Can I interject though that
Yeah.
I just noticed that a lot of men who are in a MGTOW seem to be attracted to your work, as though they are maybe misunderstanding some of the things you're saying, like taking it very literal as to be like, yeah, women suck. Yeah, let's just, you know, let's just have a good time and live the life and take care of ourselves now. And it's just, it doesn't really seem like a balanced perspective in that sense, because I listen to your work, and when I listen to the words coming out of your mouth, it seems to make sense, right? But then why are all these men gathering around and they have this totally different understanding of your work? Because it seems kind of, like there's a conflict there.
Because they're lost in the fucking storm. They're the freaking freshman level of female psychology. And so I'm hoping that the ones who come around, I'm not responsible for their motives, but if they come around, they might learn something. You see, you're calling them MGTOW coming around. I look at them as just men coming around. And if men come around and learn what I'm doing, MGTOW will mean nothing to them because they'll have suddenly seen the light. That it's their imperfections that brought the kind of women to them that, kicked their heads in, right? And did deceptive things or hurt them or whatever. And this is on both sides. And so this mud level that everyone's on, where it's just political reaction and forming a movement and all, that's all fine and dandy, right? And it's understandable, but that's moving a furniture around on the fucking Titanic. That's not going to change anything. My books are to change the whole psychological dynamics and putting up mirrors of taboo subjects. You know what I mean? And women are the focus of this because I believe this in a strange paradoxical way. Women were meant to write the book I wrote. Women are the ones who's honor bound now to change the way things are. And, they've let that go down. Women are the ones to be the psychologists. In fact, I've even said, I can't remember where it was. We said probably in one of the premiums or podcasts that, it's a call to arms. Right in the Dragon Mother book, I think I end with that. A call to arms saying, girls, it's for you to pick up the slack. This is your hallmark. This is what you're for, is to bring up your children at the very least, to admire men and to not create these fucking dynamics and not to, live in envy and all of the other stuff that I go into, in the book. It's partly women to fix the problem. MGTOW is, okay, interesting, but men are not the ones to fix the problem. It's the problems are in the female psyche.
Yeah.
That's what the book is about.
I totally agree. And that might I add, and I consider myself actually already automatically one of those women that is, here to help empower women, and not just to admire men, but I admire other women too. I admire men, women. I want to look at people from a fair, maybe that's the Libra aspect of myself, but coming from an aspect of what are their merits, and I really think that that's an important thing. And definitely, I mean, the thing is I think it's true. Women tend to, as the, nurturers by nature, since they're not as physically strong as men, they tend to exert their strength in other ways, right? For better or for worse. And so my whole thing is to understand my psychology and help other women to understand their psychology in a way that helps them to feel empowered and realize, like, that we don't have to be enemies here. Like, we should help, there should be sisterhood or at least self-empowerment. It's like, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, that's a whole different story, right? But it's just, to me, I guess what's really important is that I'm not talking about equality in this kind of socialist way when I say equality. I'm actually talking about what's fair. It's really coming down to the merits of the person, right? And giving a fair analysis of the people. And I would love to be able to interject or, have some say in the matter. I already do that, when I talk about psychology and female psychology. You're right. Women should have been doing this. But I think a lot of times what happened is because of, so many different reasons, women's input, it's like the wrong ones got promoted. It just went south, the ones that were super fanatical. Yeah.
That's basically it. That is basically it. They wrote the books. They helped script a type of modern world, programmed by their freaking Jacques Derridas and their feminism is basically the form of programming that they had. What Dragon Mother and Adult, trying to be working with the animus is the psychological way I like to put it. But what Dragon Mother contains and what adultism contain is what women should have been up to. I have presumption enough to say, I think it's just an opinion. I'm not, twisting anybody's arm to believe it. But what got derailed with the kind of feminism that we knew is presented in the book, drawing upon women like Alice Miller and Melanie Klein and all the people that are. So, I'm trying to be balanced to say, hey, girls, this is what I think should have been, and you can take it up and see if it works or not. Like next week, what we'll be doing is coming at it in another angle. When I talk about women dealing with their archetypes, and we'll go into this in as much depth as we can, but you can't even get to do any archetypal work, let alone shadow work, if you've lost the dragon fight. And the dragon fight is the daughter's relationship with her mother. So because the mother has colored the male world for the daughter, and the animus is the masculine and the male world within her. So how can you possibly do any inner masculine Jungian animus work if that what you know as an animus, your mother's had it done it tore to shreds, and that the daughters understand it, which means forget about external men. Her relationship with her own inner male, her own inner masculine, is banjaxed thanks to the dragon fight. So that's like had to lay the groundwork to show that the dragon fight is the common denominator. That's the concrete, that's not the right word, the soil from which either weeds will grow, or incredible blooms, right? And then you get to that's already the sort of soil from which all these other archetypal encounters and actions, are going to manifest. So that's where it comes back to the woman again. Mother, if you brought up your daughter to have a negative relationship with her animus, well, then we're going to have these loons, right? And these, fruitcakes and flunkies running around in the political arena trying to rebalance themselves. And then they're off kilter. So now we got MGTOW, which is another, the whole thing is gone. It's like it's Alice in Wonderland's kitchen, and tomorrow we'll have something else. So I'm looking at all that phenomenon going, but I'm trying to find its root. How did all of this stuff get derailed? And, how did the wheel come off in the first place? And that's what those books are about. And we'll be looking at it in another way, next week.
I think it's really important work, if I may say one more thing about that. Sure. For the most part, with a few little things I disagree with in your book, I agree with the basic ideas. And I think the thing that for me that's missing is the whole piece about how women have been demonized as well, like the whole witch burning thing, the time of the Inquisitions, whether or not people practice witchcraft or not, that's a whole different thing, but how the old ways of being connected with the earth, it's like there's been this kind of disconnect with that whole aspect of feminine psychology, or female psychology, I should say. And, and how that, you said this once, Michael, that women are, and I think this goes for all of us, like in our DNA, in our ancestral memories, we carry the memories of all that the women before us went through, and all the things they did and ate and saw, and so it's like that piece. See, that's where I come in with my work, because I'm really focused on the ancestral, collective, lunar, deep stuff, like you said, the realm of Persephone. And that's what I've had to navigate in my life. And that's what I had to deal with in my own healing journey, is facing all these, mother issues as well. And it's definitely important. So it's not like I'm totally disagreeing with you. It's just, I feel like I want to just bring that element into it for empowerment.
You see, remember, we're honing now what you said onto the individual woman. That's not even addressed in the book. Like, to give context to what you said, those women who were the outsiders, other women fucking hated them. All them herbalists and mystics and all, they were murdered by the women who stood by the men of that time. So the women have been, those were the individuals. Those were the individuals, right? Remember, Irish Fromm also, there weren't any individuals. Of course there were, but those individuals were crushed, whether they were women turning up and doing what they were doing. They were tolerated for their utility, because you can heal me when I'm sick, and when the pox are covering my body, call the witch, right? When the baby's not coming out right, call the witch. But on the rest of the day, they're ready to slander her and the stories all throughout Europe. When these lonely spinster women died, their houses were fucking raided by the other women. They couldn't get in there fast enough, like a pack of vultures, to take all of her sacred things. And many of the witch trials, it was other women speaking against the few women just to get their land and just to get their belongings, or just throw mother some catty, spiteful bull crap, right? So all the way down through the world. So my book does not address the individual woman. In fact, it's a call to arms to say to the woman, individuate. Anything that is truly psychological and has merit is about individuation of the individual man and woman individuating. But then the question is going to come back from those people, well, how do I do that? Right? And that's what the book's about. You start at the relationship with the mother, then it goes on to the father. You are going to encounter that father. But I'm just talking about the period of time where the mother's psyche is completely dominant. She's the one who births you. And she births both male and females. So it's like this great Euroboric process. And if you leave out the foundation, then you'll have a society in ruins like what we have, because it's not rooted deeply. So again, it comes back to women to change the way the psyche is in their children. And the man can do so, but see, the male is almost incidental to this whole process, because you only encounter the masculine psyche much later in the process of birth, even ontogenetically. But you're quite right to point out something fundamental, and that is an archetype is a memory. It's a constellation of all the experiences we've had of a thing, right? So there's an archetype of fire, there's an archetype of fear, there's an archetype of love, there's an archetype of God, because all through the phylogenetic history of the world, everyone experienced cold. Everyone experienced what it was like to, see the sunset and the sunrise. Everybody experienced what sex was like, right? The man with the woman and the woman with the man. And so over time, the collective phylogenetic memory, which science has completely proven, even though they start talking more in terms of DNA and all of this, it's just race memory. Well, outside all the stupid politically correct terms. And in that race memory, we're all, it's the myth, it's the archetypal level below. There's a deeper level in even that, which is the experience of God, or the experience of psyche, the experience of psyche itself, the experience of spirit itself, which, leave that unto itself. But then the next level up is archetypal, right? Mythic, as Joseph Campbell and others would call it. That's the phylogenetic history of all experience. Everybody knew what it was experienced to be hungry. Everybody knew what it was experienced to feel the wind in their hair when they rode a horse or whatever, right? So there's millions of these experiences, but even out of those experiences come the ones that are extremely important, that all people at all time and all races, all castes, whether you're rich or poor, experienced. Motherhood, right? What was a mother? What was the father? What was sibling rivalry, right? What is God? What is mystery, right? What is beauty, right? So all of these things are experienced, and that's what art is all about. So I come at things, trying to update where we are with that experience. Where we're right now is critical, because we may have had centuries of those kinds of experiences, but special things are happening right now in our time that could completely erase the whole of civilization. And women who are not, are the ones who should have been preserving civilization. Man creates, women preserves. And I'm just generalizing there, because there's women who create as well. But the thing is that the preservation of, and in the tarot, it's the Hierophant, which is run by Venus, right? So that's a female archetype as well, and the Empress as well. So when this preservation aspect gets lost, it doesn't matter what was built, right? If I'm putting in the library, and I think there's stuff on the shelves back there gathering dust, but no, somebody's been, burning it to keep their hands warm. Oh my God, when I go back there, there's nothing there. What have you guys been doing? Well, you see, this is the thing. Where are the archivists? The woman who brings up her child must, in her own self-conversation, carry the nucleus of the civilization in her being. It's not something that's articulated by the male. Well, sit down, son, like in Conan the Barbarian, and he starts explaining the secret of steel. The woman is meant to communicate the secret of a universe non-verbally, in a completely empathic way, to transmit to the child. If that's not happening because she's voided with some other idiotic conversation or just a complete nonce, fucking hell, do you realize what that means for the fetus and for the growing child? And then even though it meets the male consciousness down the line, the male consciousness is not enough. It might stabilize a little bit, but you'll get MGTOW out of that because it's overdone it, right? The stick is put in to, stabilize, but it's made of iron. It has no flexibility. Oh, women are bitches. Sure, that's all you need to know. They're tigresses. Brilliant. Can we move on now to the second page? That's all I'm doing,
I think I appreciate that clarification. There's definitely a lot of important points around that, and I guess we'll say where I come in is just what I still maintain is that is true, that women are the carriers, but in some cases it's not their fault that they lost it. There was a lot of destruction, a lot of pillaging and raping and genocide that happened, and that has to be taken into consideration here. It just cannot be excluded. It's irrefutable that has had an influence, and that one
right,
gender.
But you're missing the point.
I don't blame either.
You're missing the point. The men who did all those things that you're talking about, right? The criminal history of mankind, which I certainly never have shown that I doubt, they were all born of women. So the root ontological premise here is that a man who goes around to destroy, and I've made this clear in so many of the articles and books, the man who goes around to be pathological, it all still boils down to his relationship with his mother. There's no way around it. And
Well, I
but
didn't.
I will say that I don't ask people to believe that. They have to think about that
Yeah,
for themselves.
I didn't miss the point. I just see it from a different point of view. But I appreciate your point of view. So I do
Well, and
appreciate the clarification.
yeah, it's good. And I just wanted to add one more thing in here just about Michael's work. And this could be for any of our members listening as well, that if you go back, you can watch well, we could go through Path of the Fool. You could go into Brotherhood of Death. You could go into the divination and the goddess tradition. And you can see Michael did an entire encapsulation of the positive sides of the female and the history of the female. And you even did, Michael, in divination and goddess tradition. You did cover the whole idea of the witch burnings and the horrors of the church, and laid it at the feet of religion, and brought out the positive cults that came out of the ancient world, the feminine cults. Even in Female Illuminati, there's a whole section in there about like the presentation that you did, which you can catch on Premium, is a whole section about the suffix and the positive female. And what I want to know, Yerevan, is if you're asking that question, because I've had other women ask this question, will say, well, hey, if you're in there critiquing female psychology or looking at modern feminism and what's happening, aren't you going to attract negative males that are just going to jump on that and misinterpret it? First of all, any author, no matter what you write about, you're going to attract lice, okay? And second, would you then admit that it could be the same dynamic happening when you have how many psychotic women coming to see divination and goddess tradition and go, oh, well, yeah, I guess that means that I'm the shit, and men are like, they could misinterpret that on the other way as well. So if you have someone like Michael, I've just known him for a long time and I've looked at his work, and you see that, Michael, you've always gone through and covered all of it. You've done, like, even the Brotherhood of Death. You went into the male psychopaths that are, the negative hierarchy, the evil that's been done. Is that not enough? Is that, so now when you come and you say, well, let's take a look. We've done that chapter 17 times. Now, when we take a look at this in the present time, when we have a malignant form of feminism and an over hyper feminization of society happening, we should maybe look at female psychology. And why is it then that we have this problem where many, many women, not all, but for some reason it's poisoned the culture, do not want to look at psychology, whether you pull them kicking and screaming into it? I'm not saying that's you or anybody, but I'm just saying that means that this is a subject worth covering, because we are looking at the meltdown of civilization. And also when it comes to torturing and raping and genocide and murder, that's something that human beings have experienced in history. Okay, and we can go and play
I
blame
agree.
game Olympics, and we can do all of that. It's the same discussion with races. Everybody's like, oh, our race was enslaved more than your race, and all. And you just go, look, we could play this all back and forth. This is a human dynamic that's happening. And the reason it's happening, whether it's in men, women, or this race or that race, boils down to psychology. And there's a lot more factors at play than just, oh, it's men, it's women, it's this, it's that. And anybody
David,
that's looked at the whole work would be able to
exactly.
understand that's what Michael's done with his work.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that's exactly my point, though. My point is that it cannot be just blamed on one gender, one race, one anything, because it's like, it's a big mess. It's a big mess now. And even, to put the blame on one does kind of shirk responsibility on the other side, and it creates more division. That's just what I'm noticing, is that it's like, because both are to blame. They're like, I do relationship counseling, for example, and I see the flaws in both sides. So I see the mistakes that women make and that men make, but they're different. Why? Because they have different psychology. So there's different patterns on both sides. So I agree with you in the sense that it's about human psychology and understanding that. So, that I definitely agree. And I respect Michael's work. My gosh, you did a lot of work over the years. So it's not that I'm just throwing everything out or saying that I disagree with everything. It's just there's certain things that I just have a different point of view about, but that's okay. Because if we all looked at things in the same way, it would be boring.
Absolutely.
I welcome it. I totally welcome this, because I've learned from women more than you can imagine to lead me to study female psychology in the first place. But there is a danger, you see, that, remember that old adage that find out who it is in society that you can't speak about? They're the fucking controllers. Right. It's not Jews, it's women. We're getting to the point now where the women of the world are so impervious. All this political running around in histrionics is precisely to make sure that there's so much noise that we can't get the psychology anymore. That's the message I'm pushing now this year,
But
after looking back on my 2 books and thinking,
here's
oh,
here's
what?
the thing. You're saying that this is, they can't be talked about, but to me, this is nothing new. People have been talking about women's psychology forever, demonizing women's psychology forever. It's like women have been the hag on the broomstick with the wart, and just fucking, it's all about how awful, temptresses and stuff from biblical times. It's not new, So when Molyneux comes out with his, understanding evil women shit, I'm like, wait a second, this is nothing new. This is old news. Everybody knows about this. Can we all just talk about, just get down to basics here?
Yeah,
Psychology.
but the thing is, in my own defense, I would say that everything I'm doing on women is new. Every single part of it is new. It has not been, and if it has been dealt with by some thinker before, he's completely unknown. I know the ones who are. So what I'm trying to get to point is that it's women psychologists that I'm usually mostly expanding on, right? In various ways, not always straightforwardly, but I totally defend my own work by saying most of it that I bring to the table is new, because I've synthesized the world's literature on this fact. All these things you're talking about, I know about. And I know the most extreme masculine approaches, which are the most misogynist, and I know the opposite side. And what I've got has been synthesized, sort of percolated out of both of those sides. Very much carefully done with the pro-female, like David has said, in mind, and all the positives of that, and also the negatives as well. It's definitely been as balanced as I could make it, so I was hoping that people would see that and not take offense, because no offense is ever meant. And believe me, my work cannot be put in the category of any other male writer on this subject, male or female, because I come from too many different schools. You got a little bit of conspiracy in there. You got a little bit of the female psychology. You've got philosophy, deep philosophy, so there's a lot of aspects I bring to this thesis that you will not find in the work of anybody else.
It is unique. It's definitely unique. And so I do respect you for that work, Michael. So I appreciate you hearing me out on this. And, because I'm all into, just having this kind of talk. It's really illuminating for me.
I
and
appreciate
hopefully,
it. We should, Sammy, we'll do it again. I mean, any criticisms that anybody has, this is to be added to the mix. Absolutely. Because remember, it's like in my own astrological systems. There's only in one life those are brought to the world. The other systems have had thousands of years. In Dragon Mother, I'm bringing in one life a little bit of a new perspective. The way that mankind has thought has been thousands of years. So when any new ideas are brought to the table, of course, it's axiomatic that they should be criticized, and that they should, like Patrick McGowan said about his prisoner, I want fists up in my face. I want people to, be angered by this and be brought. Remember, I said it's disturb, right? If you disturb the sleep, we get something out of it. I'm completely wanting to be wrong, right? When I wrote this book, it was written in a very different comportment than other things have been done. Different forms of passion, different kinds of perspectives. This is the oldest subject I've studied, starting back in 1989. And it was always done behind other work, where you have to do, it's just the way the mix happened, right? So I would love to be wrong about every single part of it, and I'm as open to anybody for them to critique every single line of it. It's been put together over a monumental struggle, a monumental process, but I'm not attached to it in any sort of way that's dogmatic. What was that?
I said that's the beauty of philosophy. It's just this journey of discovery. So just when you think you got something, you get this other angle. And what if it's all right, but at different times in different ways? And it's just about integrating and understanding the different ways. So, yeah.
Well, remember intention. The intention is the important thing. The intention here was to upgrade the consciousness and the lucidity of experience in all parties, especially the parents, right? Parenting now is a nightmare. So this was intention to say, hey, parents, here's another book that you can add, it'll give you some insight. Here's another. So the intention in writing all those books was positive, to upgrade the female psyche as much as the male as much as the female, right? So there's no apology for any part of it, because it was sincere from the absolute start. And it's also my main theme is to do justice to, the Otto Ranks and the Alice Millers and people like that, and Jung and Newman. Naumann, this is those books are written also to make sure that these scholars are not forgotten. People like Wilhelm Reich and all. So I was following that same old thread that I've done before, but this time I thought of trying to condense all that I'd learned about, female psychology. And it doesn't mean I'm right in everything, right? It doesn't mean that any part of it, will be necessarily applicable to any other person out there. It's just put on the shelf, for people to muse over, see what they like about it, whether something makes sense. And again, it's all about coming back in 15 years, is the greatest acid test of all. Apply some of the rules of it, and come back and see what your children are like in 15 years. I put my faith in that,
Yeah. Well, good work. I mean, it's definitely, I agree with you about parenting these days. It's really scary to see what's happening with the child rearing, or the lack thereof, just the lack of attention, the lack of care. Just put your kid in front of an iPad and call it a day. It's so tremendously sad. And so that's why I do think that a lot of the work you're doing is very on point and important. And I have some different ideas specifically about the female psychology, but I do think it's important to examine the dark areas, the areas that people are not comfortable with, because until we do that, we're just going to keep on perpetuating these cycles, these awful
let's
cycles.
And you got to keep the narrative going. I'm not asking a single person to accept anything I've written, so what you're doing is good. If you're looking at my stuff critically, that is the best thing that could happen. That's exactly what I want. I don't want people going along, or some fanatic picking it up in either way, like David said, a misogynist, or the opposite of that. I want people critically looking at every line and tearing it apart and seeing if it works for them, and that's the intention. It's been the intention since day one. Otherwise, I would have been doing it in a mainstream way with all the protections, right? I'm doing it in this fringe movement, committing to that. Trying to do things from a very radical, perspective, because I don't give a shit about, being politically correct. And if there's if there's people out there with other ideas, it's very important to be able to hear those ideas. And I hope that work has been the synthesis of the ideas. I didn't come at it as a misogynist, you see. I came at it as a person who understands what's going on, and then trying to upgrade the whole of what we know to be man and woman and masculine and feminine. And I look at it as the greatest work I've done, but that's not the last word. And the narrative has to continue. So I value people like yourself, and I'd love to see, your ideas in the future. If you write them down, I want to read them, and I would love to give feedback as well, just like you're giving feedback on my work. I am totally open to that. There's no final sort of all wrapped up, thesis there. It's for exploration. And out of that simple observation and simple exploration comes some very, very fine, changes in people and in society. That was my original intention.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate the clarification that you've offered on this subject. And I mean, both of you, I just appreciate that. I never would have thought that I would have been talking on this show, but, it's been a wonderful learning opportunity. So thank you both.
Well, we love having you here, Van.
Welcome.
That was great. And thanks again for coming on and sharing your work. And all of our members are here having a fantastic conversation. They're just thoroughly enjoying this and getting a lot out of it. I think this is extremely valuable. I come from a martial art tradition where I scrap on a weekly basis with my best friends, and we knock each other around, and then we go out and we have some beers, and we all learn something about ourselves. And I think when you come to philosophy and deep subjects and trying to pierce the dark heart of the world and the good and the bad and the ugly and juggle it all and try to find out the truth out of the lies, if you're not uncomfortable from time to time or willing to engage in some productive discussion from opposite points of view, you're not going anywhere. And I think people are far too comfortable today. And, so I think this is very valuable. So thanks to you both. Thanks to our members. And as we said, this is never the last word. This is an ongoing discussion that we're having here on Unslaved. And thanks for your support. And we'll continue to do that each week. And we got some awesome content and guests coming your way. So stay tuned.
Can I say one more thing really
Sure.
quick?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry. I just forgot to say this earlier, but on the music side of things, I just released a new CD with my fiance. Some of you might know him as John Darkley, but it's called Deceive, and we're called Undine. And it's very watery, lunar, speaking of the feminine and the lunar, those who are particularly tuned into that might appreciate that. So you can see it on our website. Thank you.
Great. No, we'll put some links below for people. Awesome. All right. Well, that's all, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week back here on Unslaved. Cheers.